Honourable Member for Churchill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will be splitting my time with my colleague, the member for Vancouver East. Our message to Parliament today is enough is enough. No other woman, no other Aboriginal woman should go missing or be murdered in Canada. Mr. Speaker, Aboriginal women in this country in 2013 are 5 to 7 times more likely to die from violence than any other woman. What is wrong with this story? What is wrong with this picture? What are people doing wrong? Where is the federal government? And why is the federal government not listening to the voices of the families of those that have lost their sisters, their daughters, their mothers, their friends? To the voices of Aboriginal organizations, such as the Native Women's Association, such as the Assembly of First Nations, to Aboriginal leaders, such as chiefs, grand chiefs, the national chief, to civil society, organizations like Human Rights Watch from the United States that came out and spent time in northern British Columbia and sat down with women that were abused and sat down with families of women that were taken away. And why is this federal government, this conservative federal government, unwilling to listen to all of these voices and unwilling to call a national public inquiry into missing and murdered Aboriginal women?
In Canada, Native women are 7 times more likely to die of violence than non-Native women. Over 600 Native women have been murdered or have disappeared. This is a fact in Canada. According to the Aboriginal Women's Association of Canada, 55% of these women have disappeared in the last decade. 2/3 of these cases were in Western Canada, and most of the women who were attacked were under the age of 31. 80% of them left children behind. The cases which happened in the last decade represent 10% of homicides in Canada, and all of these victims were women, despite the fact that Native women only make up 3% of the female population of Canada. Yesterday, Human Rights Watch, an internationally renowned organization, published a report with regard to abuse against Native women in British Columbia. They interviewed women and their families who either were victims of violence or lost one of their women. They talked about the Highway of Tears, which is a national shame for a country. Be it the Highway of Tears, the East End, downtown Vancouver, and certain areas of Toronto, Halifax, Quebec City, St. John's. Throughout our country and in other communities, such as the Cree Nation, Norway House Cree Nation, Apasquia Cree Nation, in towns like Thompson, the Pa. In every one of these places has stories to tell, not only about one woman, but about many women who have disappeared from their homes, from buildings, in the woods. These women disappeared without justice being done to them or their families.
Sentiment of justice. These women have disappeared and have been murdered without the answers that we need to have to make this stop. And what are we all here to do than to build a better today and tomorrow for the people of Canada? What is this government here to do than to answer the demands of families that have gone through the biggest tragedy of losing their loved one. How many times does this have to take place before this federal government will act and call a national public inquiry? We need a national inquiry, as so many people say, so we can find the answers. So we can look at what are the factors behind this national tragedy. Behind the fact that Aboriginal women go missing at a rate much higher than anyone else because they are Aboriginal women. We need to look at the extreme marginalization, extreme poverty. I don't know how much time government members have spent in some of these communities that women go missing from. And if they've sat down with the families of those that have lost. I've sat down with the families of Lorna Blacksmith, of Sunshine Wood, and I've met family members of Helen Betty Osborne. Women that were taken from their communities in northern Manitoba and are never coming back. And I and my colleagues and people out there have seen the pain firsthand, and they have seen the cry for justice. And the question is, why is this federal government unwilling to listen to these voices? Unwilling to sit down and say, yes, let us seek that justice together. Let us find those answers. And let us commit to action. Where we put a stop to the third world living conditions that Aboriginal people face. To the extreme poverty that Aboriginal women in communities across this country face. Let's realize that when we don't fund education properly, I mean, look at the protest outside on Parliament Hill today. Children protesting to their own federal government for equal education. What country are we in? This is Canada. This is unacceptable. Why are their communities, why are the first peoples of this land still living in abject poverty? And why are they paying the highest price? Losing their family members, losing their women, losing the life givers of their community, of their nations. Not only is this federal government has it failed to act until this point and has failed to call for a national inquiry. But we have seen some of the most severe cuts in these last few years that go directly to both finding the answers and alleviating the situations that Aboriginal women in Canada face. The list is long, but I will mention a few. Most importantly, Sisters in Spirit, an organization that did nothing more than bring families together and that began the arduous task of finding data, of connecting stories, whether they're from northern BC or the Northwest Territories or the East Coast, and putting those stories into numbers, 600 plus, average age 31 and younger, more than 80% leaving children behind. That organization is gone. Native Women's Association, the prime national organization that advocates for Aboriginal women, cut. The First Nations Statistical Institute, gone. The National Aboriginal Health Organization, gone. The Prairie Women's Health Research Center and its sister organizations, gone. Organizations at the local level, basic funding, gone. Mr. Speaker, our message to Parliament is enough is enough. Assez, c'est assez. It is time to act. This is an issue of life and death. And it is up to us to take the leadership, up to this government to take the leadership and commit to bringing justice to these families, to these women, to these communities, and to our country. Only will they do that when they begin by committing to a national public inquiry and a commitment to action. We stand in solidarity, we are proud to do so, and we in the NDP will not rest until that national inquiry is called and that no other woman, no other Aboriginal woman dies in Canada. Thank you.